So my question today is why are there so many genealogies in the New Testament and why do they matter? Let's be honest. Most of us at one point in time or another have skipped through the genealogies in the Old Testament at some point, not because we're trying to ignore the Bible, but because verses like Cause begat Anab and Zobeba and the families of Aharhel, the son of Haram, not exactly light reading over our morning coffee. And sometimes when we can't pronounce the names, our eyes start to glaze over. We struggle through the words. We start flipping pages really faster than we care to admit. Oh, I read that. But what if those lists of who begat whom aren't just Bible filler and they're actually important? Uh, because they're far more important than just being an ancient tongue twister. They're really crucial and vital to our understanding of how uh, trustworthy Scripture is, the historical identity of Christ, and God's plan through the ages and its continuity. So, anybody serving in ministry, especially those serving with teens, as I do, um, we're asked those questions. And we need to be able to explain why those chapters, those hard to read chapters, really do matter more than we realize. Because, first of all, the genealogies, they anchor the Bible in real history. So, the Bible, it's not vague mythology. It doesn't begin with some sort of fairy tale. It begins with names, dates, and places. It's solid. The genealogies in Genesis, namely 5 and 10 and others, show that the Bible treats its story as history. It's not imaginary. It's true fact. The records demonstrate that Scripture is it's rooted in people, real people like you and me, living in real time. In the book of Luke, in the New Testament, of course, but Luke 3:23 to 38, that traces Jesus' lineage all the way back to Adam. That reinforces that the Bible uh, is a continuous historical narrative. There's no breaks in it. Started from the beginning and continued all the way through. And the thing is that what the genealogies do, they connect everything, similar to tissue connecting our bones together. Um, these genealogies do that. They show that the Bible wasn't made up, that everything connects through into making it one uh, continuous story, and that it was preserved through generations. Genealogies also they trace the line of promise that we have, because through the Old Testament, God made covenants with specific individuals that we're familiar with, and the genealogies allow us to follow those promises. First, we see from Adam to Noah. We see it in Genesis 5 that God preserved a righteous line despite the growing wickedness in the world, all the way to Noah. From Shem to Abraham, there was a promise that God chose in Genesis 11 that God chose one family to bless all the nations. From Abraham to David, First Chronicles and 1 to 3 and Ruth 4, God established a covenant with that royal line. And then from David to Jesus in Matthew 1, the promise of Messiah came through the line of David. And this is important because it's not just, say, Bible trivia. What we are seeing here is Jesus fulfilling prophecy. It's God fulfilling prophecy and saying that it would happen and that it did. And then in Galatians, Paul confirmed in 3:29, said, "And if ye be Christ's, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise." So we see that it also traces that line of promise all the way from, like I said, we followed the four different promises from Abraham to Jesus. Promised that that was going to happen. And then continuing on, it proves God's faithfulness through the generations. So, as we know, God does not forget his people. The genealogies, say the ones we found in Ezra or Nehemiah, like Nehemiah 7, they show the people of Israel their identity or remind them of their identity, I should say. And they also remind them of God's faithfulness, even after exile and judgment and all the Israelites did and went through. And we see that it's not just a list that's there, it's an evidence of God keeping his word across the centuries. And Archer talked about the continuity of the genealogies, the accuracy of the genealogies, and how they support the unity and the historicity of Scripture. He affirmed that the records were a consistent thread, as I've mentioned, from all the way from the earliest chapters of Genesis through the return from exile. So we see right there that Archer agrees with this as well. And then we see that really these genealogies do actually speak to and answer the questions of that we'd be asking today an identity and trust. Because I mentioned teenagers, but also adults are asking, can I trust the Bible? Are the stories true or are they just made up? How do we know Jesus is who he said he is? How can we trust him? How can we follow him? How can we love him? How can we have a relationship with him? They're asking all these questions. You have been asked them. If you are in ministry, you have been asked these questions. And believe it or not, these genealogies can help us answer that with confidence because it shows it's our anchor. It's our foundation that we can trust in because if you have a solid foundation, such as the genealogies in the Bible, then that's what we can build on. And what we show is that Scripture is consistent. Jesus is, he has what we would say legal and prophetic qualifications, and then really just seeing God's work in the world and the reality of it. But then also we can see who is a part of Jesus' genealogy. So Matthew 1, we see Rahab, who was a harlot, Ruth was a Moabitess, Bathsheba, of course, we know as the wife of Uriah, we see who they were, but we also see that they matter. They did not come from a perfect human background. They were used. I'm sorry, Jesus did not come from that perfect background because we see where he came from. But he didn't come from that perfect background. He came from the brokenness of that genealogy and came to redeem us in a broken humanity. And so that really makes it personal to us. It makes it that it doesn't matter where we come from, our background either. It shows, wow, it doesn't matter where I come from. I can serve Christ where I am. He understands where I came from. And so, whoever we're working with, whether it's a teen, whether it's an adult, whether they're curious, whether they're skeptical, whether they're unsure, we need to know what we believe. And we need to know why we believe it. Because, as we know, we're being watched as Christians very closely. And people are asking us those hard questions. And sometimes they just assume that the Bible is another religious book. But these genealogies give us another tool in our tool belt for apologetics or for witnessing, however it is. And that our faith is built on fact. Now, faith, there's parts of our faith that are proven through our faith, but there's a good bit of our faith that is built on fact, nothing fiction. There's no fiction about it. And that every generation matters to God because he sees names. God doesn't see numbers. He sees names. He sees souls. So next time we're reading those words, those names that we just don't know how to pronounce, First Chronicles, Matthew, let's slow down and think about why those are in there because there's gold in them. We can find gold in those if we're just willing to dig for it.